Welcome back. As President Trump weighs whether the United States will get directly involved in the Israel-Iran conflict, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was on Capitol Hill this morning, and while he was pressed by several members of the Senate Armed Services Committee, he declined to give any public details about what the Pentagon is or is not preparing for in the Middle East. Joining me now is Illinois Senator Tammy Duckworth. She is a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee and questioned the Defense Secretary earlier today. Senator, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
So Secretary Hegseth said he could not say very much about Iran in a public setting. Can you share anything that you may have learned behind closed doors about how close this administration is in terms of directly engaging in the offensive against Iran?
No, I can't. There was not much information that I've received. And frankly, I don't know that he himself knows what he's going to be doing. In fact, our commander-in-chief, Donald Trump, has put out on social media that, nobody knows what he's going to do. I may do it, I may not do it, according to his Truth Social post. So we're at a point where you have an incompetent Secretary of Defense and a president who's mercurial at best, and nobody is coming to consult Congress, a co-equal branch of government. And should the president launch an attack, it will be in violation of the War Powers Act. And so he needs to come to Congress right away.
So let's just break this down a little bit. First, just to lay down this marker, do you support an American strike to take out Iran's nuclear program?
I would need to know more information before I could support such a strike. I do think that we need to stop Iran from developing their nuclear program. I'm concerned about how we're going to go about doing it, and that we don't actually encourage, at the end of the day, the PRC, the North Koreans, the Russians to become even more determined to help Iran rebuild its nuclear program. That would be even worse. Remember that Donald Trump is the guy who actually pulled us out of the Iran nuclear deal, where we were actually monitoring their development of nuclear capabilities. That's Donald Trump's fault. We are here because Donald Trump pulled us out of the nuclear deal, and now we're going to have to do the cleanup for the mess that he created from his first term.
Would you, I know you're saying you need more information, would you be more inclined to support the United States giving the Israeli military equipment to carry out strikes themselves, more strikes?
Again, this is about what happens even beyond the initial strike. This is the thing about military planning, right? You got to look at what happens the day after. So whether we conduct the strike or whether we give the Israelis the capability to do the strike, what happens the day after that? Do we then end up having to put boots on the ground? Secretary Hegseth was asked this very question in committee today, like, what is your planning for the next day and the day after? And he couldn't answer because he didn't have an answer. I don't want this to end up with American troops on the ground in the Middle East, in Iran, for 10, 20 years, the way we ended up in Iraq. That is not what this country needs, and that's certainly not what anybody voted for.
So, Senator, just to be very clear and to go back to the point that you just made, do you think that President Trump has to come to Congress before he can sign off on any type of strike against Iran at this point?
I do. The War Powers Acts are very clear. You've got to retaliate. He's allowed to move forward if it's in defense of, in response to an attack, or whether American troops are about to be attacked. And neither one of those conditions have happened.
Let me ask you this. Notably, in March, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, said the U.S. intelligence community assessed Iran was not building a nuclear weapon. At this very moment, Senator, what is your understanding of the current intelligence of Iran's nuclear capabilities? Do you think that they are closer to developing a nuclear weapon?
Well, she's the head of the national intelligence, so I would think that she would know more than anybody else. It's sad that Donald Trump doesn't even trust his own staff. And if he's just going on his own gut instincts, then God forbid where America ends up with a president who isn't listening to his closest advisors at the top of government, who have the most direct access to the intelligence that we all here in Congress would love to see ourselves.
So do you have confidence in the assessment that Tulsi Gabbard delivered back in March?
I don't have confidence in anybody in the Trump administration at this point. He's appointed a bunch of people who are incompetent and not capable of doing their jobs. And here we are watching chaos erupt around the world and lack of competent people to deal with it.
Do you think, based on the briefings that you have had, Senator, that Iran is closer than ever to developing a nuclear weapon? As you noted, the Iran nuclear deal was ripped up.
I do. I do think that Iran is closer to developing a nuclear weapon, closer now than they would have been had we stayed in the Iran nuclear deal. And this is thanks to Donald Trump, because he's the guy who pulled us out of it. However, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. If you're going to plan an attack, you need to come to Congress, lay out all the information, show us why this is what we need to do, and then tell me, what is your plan for the day after? What happens next? What are the next steps? You can't just go out and then come back and say, oh, by the way, now we're going to send thousands of America's finest men and women in uniform, and they're going to go to Iran. We're going to now invade Iran next. Then we're going to hold the ground, and then we're going to be there for 5 years or 10 years, and we're going to do this under what? A military authorization for use of force from, what, 20 years ago? There's a process, and they're supposed to go through it, and this administration is not doing it. And in fact, we have a president who's not even listening to his top advisors.
I want to play you something that your colleague, Senator Lindsey Graham, said today about potential repercussions from American strikes. Take a look.
So all these people are talking about what if. Well, how can it be any worse? The guy in charge wants to kill all the Jews, reshape Islam in its own image, and come after us. November the 4th is Death to America Day in Iran. So the idea, well, what happens next? It can only get better. It can't be any worse.
What is your reaction to Senator Graham and those who would call for regime change?
What would be worse would be American troops on the ground in Iran for an indefinite amount of time being targeted by rebels, being targeted by terrorists. That would be even worse. I don't want to put American boots on the ground, troops on the ground, because of a failed policy by this administration. If he wants to do something, come and talk to us, show us, make the argument, and then I'll vote on it.
You know, there are some, including Lindsey Graham, quite frankly, who are arguing that Iran has never been weaker than it is right now, in part because it has had these bombardments by Israel. Do you see it that way? And is that an argument? Does that bolster, for example, your authorization, if this were to come to Congress, for there to be U.S. strikes?
I mean, I do think that Iran underestimated Israel, and that they are weaker than they were before these strikes happened. They've certainly had some of their top key leadership been killed by the Israeli airstrikes. But that is still not a reason to engage directly with Iran. That is still not a reason for us to open the door and start on the on-ramp towards American troops being present in Iran for God knows how long, with no exit strategy. We've done that before. We've seen this movie before. Let's not replay it and do a sequel to what happened in Iraq or Afghanistan.
All right, Senator Duckworth, we really appreciate your perspective today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we have much more news and politics to dig into straight ahead. The panel is next. You're watching Meet the Press now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or watch live on our YouTube channel.